be. All right, so with that, let's get into things today. I want to start out with this thing that is being called net neutrality. And I want to tell you that this is not new, that I was writing about this as a blogger in 2006, which is 2 years before I even started the Survival Podcast. And I want you to realize that from 2006 to 2017, we were told we needed this thing, and it was only about a year and a half ago that Barack Obama empowered the FCC to sort of kind of do part of it, but what they really want is a law, a net neutrality law. That's what the goal of these people is. And so there's been numerous bills out there over the years, all of which have failed to gain enough traction to pass, primarily with Republican opposition. And I'm just reporting the facts here. It's not one side's good or one side's bad. And in spite of all the fact that we need this, most of us would have to say that our internet has worked just fine, and no, Comcast isn't charging us extra money to go look at YouTube videos or to use Twitter, which is some of the fear tactics going on in this. Before I go further with this, I want to point something out. The majority of Americans are actually for net neutrality, but they don't know what it means. They just hear the word, net neutrality. That sounds like a good thing. And the basic premise is that an ISP, or internet service provider, has to treat all internet traffic the same. So if I buy service and you buy service, and I'm accessing one website and you're accessing another, they have to treat our service the same. And on the face, that sounds like a good thing. Okay? And overall, it's pretty much what they do. Now, I also want you to understand that the people proposing this legislation are people that know absolutely nothing about network management, about outside plant, about inside plant, about WANs and LANs. Okay? They don't know anything about that. And I don't, push my credentials very much, especially since both of these credentials are long since expired because I never kept up my CEUs for them. But when I was in telecom field, I went and studied and passed exams for the following. I was an RCDD, that is a Registered Communications Distribution Designer. I also had a LAN specialty, which is Local Area Network specialty, and an OSP specialty attached to that RCDD. OSP is outside plant. So I know network design from the architecture standpoint in every conceivable way that it interacts with internet technology and communications. And this is the industry that I came up in before I walked away and decided to do this. This is the industry that I've been in my whole life. So I know a little bit more about the senators and congressmen about how networking actually works and what service providers actually do than congressmen or senators on either side of this debate. I don't say that to sound egotistical. I just want to point that out. I think it's important when somebody talks about something complicated like this, you know the frame of reference that they're coming from. Okay, now I want to point one more thing out that I think might be the most critical and important thing here yet. The Net Neutrality Act, or Net Neutrality Law, or the Law for Net Neutrality. This is the word they've been using, again, since 2006, claiming this is necessary. Okay? All right. I want to give you 3 other laws, and I want you in your head to answer me, what do they have in common? They are the Patriot Act, the Freedom Act, and the Affordable Care Act. What do those 3 laws have in common? And you're thinking, well, 2 of them are really related to each other. The third one's really not. No. Semantics here, guys. Just the title. It should have actually been called the Traitorous Act, the Taking of Freedom Act, right? And the Unaffordable Care Act. The Patriot Act was basically traitorous actions against the people of the United States by its government. The Freedom Act was furthering those actions and reinforcing them. And as we all know, the Affordable Care Act has made insurance unaffordable for the majority of people in America. Our insurance now costs more unless we're in some little tiny group of people that are getting it for next to nothing by stealing it from everybody else, and it's unaffordable. Okay? So, when the government is pushing something heavily, it doesn't matter which side is pushing it, because I will remind you that the right brought us the Traitorous Act and the Lack of Freedom Act, okay? Okay? Doesn't matter. Whenever they call something that sounds good, it is almost inevitable that it's actually the opposite of what they call it. You know, there's a joke from The Simpsons, the Flags for Orphans bill. And in that episode, they attached an amendment to reroute airlines because nobody would vote against the Flags for Orphans bill. Got it? Okay. So now let's talk about what this net neutrality thing means. What service providers do right now is they make decisions based on network capability. The internet is not an unlimited thing. Comcast doesn't have unlimited bandwidth for everybody at the same time. And when you buy a consumer product, because my buddy Brian Black from ITS was bitching about this today, you buy a consumer level product like a $30 DSL service or a $50 cable modem service, you are very much on a shared service. And when they tell you get 60 megs or 30 megs or whatever it is, that's to the best of their ability at any given time during the day or night. And there's a lot of other people using it too. And somewhere in that network is a thing called a DSLAM. And there's other pieces of equipment that do the same thing in more modern networks now, or when you're not in DSL, you're in the cable modem world, but it doesn't really matter, okay? In the end, you get to a place that you can think of as, well, you can think of it as kind of a multiplexing concentrator. Everybody, no matter how big your pipe is, I don't care if you have fiber going from your house to the central office terminal where the equipment's located, and you have you could run a gazillion, cajillion gigawatts a millisecond through that piece of line. Sooner or later, it will plug into something, and you will share service with other people. If you're paying for a business class service, you're sharing service too, unless you're getting a dedicated line, something like a T1. Okay? But you're sharing with less people, and you'll have a different service level agreement, or SLA, with your provider. This is why when I had an office in Hot Springs, my internet cost me about 5 times what it would cost a homeowner a block down the road. But when their internet went out, they called and they waited and they finally talked to somebody and we'll try to get to it tomorrow. And they had to go through a robot first. And when I had an internet problem, I made a phone call which was immediately answered and my situation was addressed as quickly as possible. I had a different service level agreement that I paid more money for. Okay? But I was not on a dedicated line. A T1 or dedicated line, it could be a T3, it could be a bonded T1. A lot of people think that's really slow because it's 1.455 megabits per second, if I remember correctly, and that sounds very, very slow. However, it is your own highway. You are connected directly into the bandwidth on the other side. You get that speed all the way through. Your only limit to your speed is the uplink speed of that which you're connecting to. And this is why people that have, let's say, a T1 out of business can stream videos on Netflix if they want to, and it works just fine, even though it seems awful slow to you that only read the numbers. Because it's like having a highway with a kind of a medium speed limit, but there's no other cars on it. Okay? These are all fundamental realities of how this shit works. And I know there's some of you that know as much as me and more than me, and going, but there's all these other things. Yes, I am bringing it down a little bit. Quite a bit, in fact. But this is the basics of how this works. So what happens is you and everybody else gets home from work at the same time, and you all jump on the internet to check your email and watch cat videos and shit like that at the same time. And if enough people get in the same node at the same time and end up at that same concentration point, DSLAM, etc., it affects the performance of the network for everybody because there's a finite limit there. Well, if they promised me 60 megabits, I should... They didn't promise you 60 megabits. They didn't promise you 30 megabits. Read the freaking fine print. That's speeds up to. Okay? And it's not scientifically possible to give 1,000 people in one big neighborhood all 60 megabits of speed all the time. The equipment to do it is unbelievably. I mean, this is why people are still paying $300 and $400 and $500 for a T1 line that's a fraction of the speed, yet they have, absolutely high-level service. Because they're alone on it. You're sharing it. And what providers do at times is they will throttle back a user because he's screwing it up for everybody. So the guy that's sitting on a torrent downloading 80 videos might all of a sudden find his speed goes down. Now, often if he gets basically reboots his modem, all of a sudden his speed will go back up. But if it creates a problem again, he's going to go back down. Or they might at some point say, hey, look, during these peak hours, we're going to actually throttle anybody that's accessing streaming videos. Why? Because that's the level of service you're paying for. And what the government wants to do is come in and tell providers, you can't do these things, and call that neutrality. Okay, fine. Assuming they'll stop there, and we know that the government is the camel, and every industry that they touch is the tent, and once the nose of the camel goes into the tent, the whole camel eventually ends up in the tent, right? That's an Arab proverb, and it's a very accurate one. So the camel right now is trying to get his nose in the tent. But let's leave that alone for a second. And if they actually did this, and they just stopped there, what is the harm? What do I now do as Comcast? Or as AT&T, or what have you? When you tell me I have to do that, there's a couple things I can do. One, I can upgrade the network so it can better handle it, except that's going to cost more money. So whether I want to or not, and whether my customers are willing to absorb it or not, I'm going to spend more money. That means I'm going to charge more money. So your low-cost internet options begin to go away. And you start paying more and more for your internet. That's one thing that happens. The other thing that happens is it starts to cost more to build out a network. And therefore, it's less profitable to build a network. And therefore, my incentive as a provider to expand into new markets, which is what they claim to want, is de-incentivized. Because there's only so many people over there. And now I'm going to have to provide them all equal service. It's going to cost me more to do it, so they're not going to get it at all. That's another thing that happens. Now, here's the other thing that happens. Once the government sets precedent that we are going to regulate the internet, well, now we have to build a department of government to regulate the internet, don't we? We can't just have one law that says you can't do this. There has to be somebody to oversee that. Well, that'd be the FCC. We already have one of those. But, there's nobody whose specific job is just this. So we need a department within the FCC to do this. Well, those people are going to have jobs and salaries and job descriptions and authority. And we'll need further guidance as to what they can do. So all of a sudden, they start making other decisions about what can and cannot happen on the internet. And this all starts to cost money. So where do you think that's going to go next? Well, we need some way to fund all of this oversight and supervision that we're providing that the internet couldn't possibly survive without. Which, by the way, it hasn't had since you used to get discs in the mail that said, you've got mail, okay? We haven't had this, and everything's okay, but we need it. Well, we're going to have to fund all this oversight, so what do you think comes next? Some sort of additional tariffs or taxes on internet activity. In the end, even if you don't believe anything that I've just told you, believe this. If you say you're for net neutrality, what you are saying is you want government to regulate the internet. That's what it is. Now, it's initially, as they're speaking, a small piece of regulation. Tell me one regulation that our government has ever put in place that remained the way that it was and stayed small and didn't grow and didn't create a giant bureaucracy and screw things up. Give me one. Go ahead. I know I can't hear you, but I know the sound that you're making right now. There it is. Silence. You don't have one. There isn't one. If there was one, I would know about it. It doesn't exist. And the reason I had to put this up today is I was logging into Patreon yesterday, and this thing came up like my screen was locked. It was just a joke, right? But you have to pay extra money to access our site. And I said, we're just kidding. Not really, but this could happen. And some other freaking shopping site I was on had it, right? And I've seen this shit all over Facebook. It's bullshit. And it's Trump. Now Trump's the enemy because he's rolling back these rules that we've had for 18 freaking months, roughly. It was a little bit before that Obama made a pen stroke circumventing Congress and doing it unconstitutionally and giving some power to the FCC that they never had and weren't supposed to have. But it was only about 18 months that the FCC even kind of sort of knew what they were doing. And they didn't really do anything. They just said, hey, you're not supposed to do this. And I'm going to tell you something. The providers are continuously doing it anyway. And the FCC wasn't doing nothing about it because they don't have enough teeth to really do something about it. And all your internet shit has worked just fine, and has worked just fine since like 1996 when you got that little disc and stuck it in and dialed up on a phone modem and heard, you've got mail, and it's fine. It's almost 20 freaking years that most of you have been on the internet, and this has not been a problem. You're like, I know it was because one time I was downloading and they slowed me down, because that's how it works. And passing a law is not going to change that. They're not going to make a magical technology that allows everybody to be sitting there like they have their own freaking OC3 network. I know you don't know most of you don't know what an OC3 is. And neither do the senators and congressmen that are trying to regulate this shit. That's my freaking point. They don't know what they're doing. They screw up everything that they touch. There is not an actual problem here. And this very successful astroturfed marketing that looks like it's grassroots and isn't, okay, has been used to drum up hysteria for something that's never been a real problem. Well, Comcast might block this website because conservatives or liberals or whatever. You know what? Let them block anything they want. And watch what happens. Watch what happens. Well, there's been cases of them doing it. And what happened? Did they keep doing it? Did they get away with it? Or did people get pissed off? And then they said, shit, the market doesn't like this. And they responded to the market. Do businesses respond better to government or to markets? And again, I want you to know, back in 2006 when I was blogging about this, there were about 50 websites dedicated to this cause. And they all looked like little mommy blog sites, and they were all put together. They were all put together by large left-wing organizations, and it was a complete astroturfing. And they got a little piece of it from Obama, and now they want the whole thing. Now, here's the big thing. Probably not going to happen right now because Republicans are highly opposed to this because despite how much scum many of them are, in general, because of their marketing to their people that vote for them, they have to oppose new regulations or they get thrown out of office. I don't think they're really opposed to this. Now, yeah, I'll bet you that the cable companies and all have rallied behind that and figured this is the side of the economy to put money into the pockets of. But if they did regulate the internet with net neutrality, do you think it wouldn't be just as easy for those giant corporations to continue to buy government and actually use this new thing that they don't want right now? Well, once it's here, we'll just use it to suppress competition because we have money to lobby with and the competitors that are new upstarts don't. That's the truth. You don't want to believe it? You want to believe what you read on somebody's Facebook? You want to believe some pop-up that tells you that the website's going to be locked someday? You want to believe that the word sounds good, so it must be good? Go ahead. But after what I've just explained to you, if you believe those things, you're being willfully ignorant. Now, if you actually think government should regulate the internet, fine. Then at least you know what you believe, and I hope you know why you believe it. But net neutrality is nothing but asking government to regulate the internet. That's all that it is. And if you ask government to do something long enough, sooner or later they will. And they never stop with the level you ask them to help you with. They always try to help you just a little bit more. And in the words of a former president, one of the most horrifying things that you can ever hear from anyone is, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you.